Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chaula Gupta. I'm the VP and Chief Program Officer at Digital Promise, and I'm really excited to welcome you all to this fourth webinar focused on educational leadership in the age of AI. Big thanks to Siegel Family Endowment and Robin Hood for their support of this webinar series. I work closely with our League of Innovative Schools at Digital Promise, which is a national network of the most forward-thinking education leaders across the US. And therefore, today's topic, which is how our education leaders guiding their districts, is particularly relevant for the conversation we're going to have today. We have several members from the League of Innovative Schools, as well as other partners who will be talking about what it means to take a leadership lens as you're thinking about AI. When you're a district leader, when you're a superintendent, everyone expects you to be in the know. Everyone expects that you will lead the charge when it comes to new opportunities, such as artificial intelligence in education. But also when something goes wrong, as it sometimes inevitably does, you're also the one accountable. And so that's what we want to delve into. As a district leader, as a superintendent, how do you strike that right balance of optimism, but also ensuring that you're thinking about the risks and planning for all the barriers ahead? So we have a great panel today with leaders from across the country, and we'll dive into that conversation. Before that, I want to introduce, housekeeping. Before that, just a couple of questions, a couple of housekeeping points. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the chat within the LinkedIn Live. And especially if something's resonating with you, let us know. If there are questions you want us to tackle, let us know. And we're excited to have this conversation with you all. I want to introduce you all to our CEO of Digital Promise, Jean-Claude Brizard, who's going to frame the conversation around how we're thinking about AI in education. Jean-Claude.
Chaula, thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think my job is to set the stage a little bit and maybe talk a little bit about the league and the work that we actually do. And my next slide, please. Last year I was in London with the Education World Forum, talking to a whole bunch of national leaders on education. And one was quite dystopian about AI coming, especially in places where we have historically excluded populations, including developing countries. My pushback was that this need not be the case. If you've ever heard Andrew McAfee, the guy on the top left in your picture here, he has a series of TED Talks where he talks about that machines are coming for our jobs. I think we can do a lot in preparing young people or learners, frankly, to harness the future of work, including, frankly, how AI is disrupting or will disrupt, frankly, the world of work. So there's a bunch of things that we can talk about, and hopefully this discussion will show you how leaders of school systems are thinking about not just what is happening in classrooms, how they're preparing young people for the future of work and the future of their life. Next slide, please. One of the things that we espouse quite often at Digital Promise is that teaching is about teaching and learning. None of us chase the shiny object. We talk about, frankly, what it is to be fundamentally focused on the basics of teaching and learning. We say the most important relationship in education is between teachers, students, families, right, and instructional content. The question of technology or AI is how is that machine, that particular technology really augmenting the intelligence of the relationship. And there's a lot here we can talk about in terms of connecting pedagogy that is 24/7. And we have league districts who are doing this kind of work, connecting parents and families to the pedagogy. We can talk about how we can look at the future of assessment and how that really matters and how we look at this. We can look at how we design curricula, frankly, that harnesses technology and harnesses, frankly, the world of AI in terms of making things much more individualized, much more focused on this idea of learner variability. Next slide, please. One of the things that we also talk about, again, going back to not chasing shiny objects, I often talk to superintendents and we agree that no one's really going to be buying ChatGPT or Claude or any LLM. What they will be buying are technology products that have AI embedded in it. We all agree that every edtech product has AI or will have AI in the future. Right now, the challenge, frankly, is to make sure that systems of schools really have a coherent education technology initiative that is embedded, again, to this idea of of teaching and learning and how you connect parents and families, etc. When you look at this slide, you see that we have a whole bunch of companies producing a whole lot of technology tools for the classrooms and for schools and for school systems. By the way, this is not just about what is happening in teaching and learning. We also know that these products are coming to the back office operations like busing, food services, transportation, etc., that can really provide a level of efficiency to what we know can be a brain drain or a dollar drain, frankly, in school systems. But the biggest worry here is that when you look at this proliferation, is to make sure that systems have this coherent strategy. They know what's coming into their district. They know how it's being used by learners, by teachers, and by administrators. Right now, frankly, we do have the wild, wild west in the US, where we don't have huge control over this, and AI is only going to make this challenge, exacerbate the challenge that we have in front of us. Next slide, please. So one thing I published this paper last year on digital transformation. We know that, romance, grocery services, taxi is all being disrupted by digital transformation. That I think is yet to happen in education. We have an opportunity here to really connect all the pieces around how technology shows up in our school. Next slide, please. And I'm hoping that we get the chance to look at this publication. The next slide, Emma. We'll talk a little bit about the different levels of work that need to happen. One, when you look at the system level, and that goes from the federal government to large school systems, to states, frankly, and how they think about this idea of creating demands and incentives for the market to respond to the needs of the individual. I had a large city superintendent ask me a few weeks ago, how do I get developers to do X? My response to him was, ask for it. And the question was, how do I ask for it? I said, look at your procurement. Demand it. If you demand it, the market will respond, especially if you have the kind of market buying power that coalitions of districts or states can actually come together and actually do. At the district level, of course, we know we need to make sure that we understand efficacy, we understand how things are being used, we understand engagement, right? That we understand, frankly, the decision points are being made across the district to enable the use of technology or AI, frankly, into the work we actually do. And of course, the edtech, the producers of work need to understand how to be responsible. They need to understand the work of equity, making sure, again, that they're responding to the demands of the systems who are serving, especially the most marginalized or the most excluded populations. Next slide, please. One last thing I'll add before I turn the mic back over to my colleagues here. Give you an example of how we actually work with the League and the US government sometimes, right? So we are now developing a responsible, ethical, acceptable use policy for AI or even emerging technologies in school systems. This is not a group of leaders or researchers or technologists going to a corner and designing. Our colleagues at Digital Promise are working with 10 school districts, again, all funded by the National Science Foundation, but 10 school districts who are themselves working with our researchers and developers and technologists in designing this policy. It is done in an inclusive way and done in a way that really represents the voices of the folks who are in front of our young people, and frankly, is inclusive in the way it's designed. So last thing I'll push here is the National EdTech Plan. If you've not seen that, you should take a look at it. Talks about the 3 gaps that we need to fill: gaps in access, gaps in use, and gaps in design. This piece here gets to the design portion of our conversation. How do you design and center the practitioner or the community in the design process? Thank you. Chaula?
Thank you. Let's welcome our other panelists. We have Melissa Moore from El Segundo in California, Adam Kurth from Iowa City Schools in Iowa, Patrick Gittistrabungle from Linwood Unified School District, and Daniel Weisberg from New York City Public Schools. Thank you all for being here today. I'll start with an easy question, I think, relatively easy. All of your districts were some of the early movers when it came to AI. If I can borrow a quote from Jean-Claude, you all chose to be crew and not passengers. And I'm curious why. Why not just wait and see how it all shakes out before you start taking any steps? So Melissa, maybe we could start with you. Why did you choose to move here first here, and what were some of the early moves that you chose to make?
So, one of the things that really got me thinking was the World Economic Forum report that came out in around May of 2023. So, when you took a look at their jobs report, AI has a profound impact on the jobs of the future. I think the number one job 10 years from now is going to be AI and machine learning specialist. I don't know what that job is, but I want students who are going to be prepared to get that job. So when I think about it, I consider our graduate profile and whether our graduate profile was really staying current and relevant as it related to AI issues. And so that really caused me to start thinking I need to get in the game now and cannot just sit on the sidelines. And really got excited. Also had the opportunity to attend the AI Engage Institute, where it had researchers, it had National Science Foundation, it had Digital Promise folks, and saw things from a different lens. So really got me excited, and I recognized that in order to do this thoughtfully, I needed to engage with my community.
Thanks, Melissa. Does anyone else want to add on to that?
Sure, I'm happy to add on as well. Again, thank you, Chaula and Jean-Claude, for allowing us to be on this panel. I really wanted to the reason why we jumped right in and we're proactive about this work is really because there are already new levels of productivity and efficiency that's being created within the private sector, within other industries, right? There's new business models being created. There's new student and staff experiences that are coming out, right, over the past year. There's going to be new workforce tools and skills, bots, automation, all that stuff we've been hearing over the last 5-6 years is really coming to surface now, right? And I think that there's new opportunities for students to learn, teachers to engage. You know, I heard this on a podcast, and it goes back to what Jean-Claude mentioned earlier, is that, you know, I don't think we should really worry too much about AI taking our jobs, but we need to worry about someone who knows and understands AI and taking our jobs, right? And so I think that's our purpose, right? We want to make sure that we provide the conditions, the tools, the applications, the access to future-ready skills, to like systems and platforms, especially in a world that's really AI-driven. Careers, jobs, degree programs, colleges are going to increasingly require AI literacy. This whole idea of cognitive flexibility, like AI is going to change again in the next 6 months, right? We have to be able to adapt to that, right? And so we want to make sure that we're able to provide the conditions, the tools, the resources to our students so that that way they're ready when they go on to college, when they go on to the workforce, because again, the world is going to be shaped by these systems and these tools. And so it's important for us to really create those conditions for them to learn.
Both of you are talking a little bit about how quickly the world is evolving. We don't even know exactly what we're training our students for, but we know that they need to evolve and they need to learn and adapt quickly. And so Adam and Dan, I'm curious, how have you set up the AI strategy in your context in a way that it can not just be a plan that you create and let it sit, but something that evolves with the industry evolving, with the technology evolving?
Yeah, so I think even before the initial release of ChatGPT and kind of the explosion of discourse surrounding generative AI, we were already working on questions surrounding AI that emerged frequently from a place of concern and kind of with a presumed path of avoidance. This is a concern, and maybe there's a presumption we're going to block this thing or not do this thing. And, in my view, and this has really guided our work here in Iowa City in a lot of areas, but reactionary policy is rarely the best long-term policy. There's certainly truth to the concept that early policy is necessarily going to be limited. And to me, that speaks to the need for flexibility so that we can adapt and change as research, experience, depth of implementation all advance and change as well. And so with that said, our approach has really been to work to implement policy guidelines and also then supports for teachers, students, and our broader community that align as closely as possible with our school district mission, vision, and values statements. And through that alignment, one of the things that we found, whether it's in terms of thinking about, for example, like allowability of use of AI for assignment completion, identification of opportunities for teachers and students, or things like education about ethics and bias-related issues, we've frequently been able to rely upon policy that already exists within the district. And we think there's a lot of strength in that type of approach where we're implementing new policy as little as we possibly can. We're implementing supports as, I don't want to say as quickly because it's being done deliberately and carefully, but we're implementing as many supports as we can. But we want new AI-focused policy to be at a minimum. And one of the reasons for that is we want our broader focus on what's important to us as an educational institution to guide what students and teachers are allowed to do, encouraged to do, without an explicit focus on a particular technology.
Thank you, Daniel.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for the invite. Great to be here with you, Dan Weisberg, First Deputy Chancellor, New York City Public Schools. And I guess, Chaula, for us, yeah, we are still in the emerging technology phase of generative AI. How do we make sure that we have kind of a flexible approach? For us, it's organizing our thinking around big problems, big urgent problems that we need to solve, rather than what are we seeing out there in the candy store, so to speak, that looks good to us now. It's what are the big problems we need to solve, and then as the technology grows and evolves, hopefully its ability to help us solve these problems will grow and evolve, and I think it will. This is why we're so excited about it. So for us, it's about focus. I tell the team all the time, if you try to solve everything, you will accomplish nothing. So our focus is very clearly on bright starts and bold futures, meaning mostly around early literacy, making sure all of our kids are strong readers by 3rd grade with a strategy. We're undergoing a massive curriculum overhaul where all of our elementary schools by next year will be using high quality curriculum, but not just using them. Will be supported with curriculum specific professional development and coaching, at-elbow coaching throughout the year. And bold futures, we want to make sure that all of our students are not just graduating with a diploma, which the vast majority of them are, but really prepared for whatever that is they're going to enter the workforce, whether it's right out of high school, whether it's after getting an associate's degree, 4-year degree, graduate school. They are really prepared for long-term economic security, for getting a good job, good paying job that leads to an even better paying job, to a rewarding career. And so, but we're very excited about the progress we're making. We also know that there are some fundamental urgent problems. So for example, we're terrible, and this is, I wish I could say this was just a New York City problem. We're terrible at catching kids up who are behind. As one, if in New York City, if you're a student who the first time you take a state standardized exam in the third grade, if you get the lowest score in New York State, which is a 1 to 4 system, you get a 1. The chances that you're going to get a 3 or 4, in other words, proficient or advanced by 8th grade, is 1 in 10. We just don't do a good job of catching kids up, and I think that's in part because we ask teachers and principals and assistant principals and coaches to do something that's well nigh impossible, which is figuring out individualized acceleration pathways for kids who are behind that are really going to be effective to catch kids up. 30 of them or 25 of them for each of my students. That's, again, close to impossible. But you can imagine, back to Jean-Claude's point about how central the relationship is between educator, teacher, and student, but technology can enhance that relationship. Imagine if the teacher had an AI-powered pathway generator that could tell her or him, for this particular student who's missing this, that, and the other standard, here's how you can make sure that student catches up, and not just catches up at some undetermined later date, but by the end of this school year. How revolutionary would that be, based on, by the way, the experiences of millions of students across the country? So these things don't exist yet. Jean-Claude, you mentioned assessment. Very exciting to think about. Why is it that kids are producing work every single day, homework and classwork. If we had the right technology, that technology could tell us whether that student is on track, off track, where he or she is likely to end up, what you can do to change that curve. So we are focused on these, identifying these relatively small number of really fundamental problems, and then putting a lot of bets in the field to see. And we don't expect that we're going to get solutions, Chaula, right away, but we hope over time we will get to solutions.
Then I want to follow up. So many strings you pulled, and so I have a follow-up question for you, and maybe Patrick, Adam, and Melissa, the second question for three of you guys, maybe then as well too. You talk about this idea of coherence. You didn't mention that word, but I heard it clearly around how you actually approach the work. And in my opinion, we talk about this idea of learner variability. And the league helped us develop this program we have on our website around learner variability that really leans on the learning sciences, but gets to this idea of really why get personal, why are you personalizing, why are you personalizing it, etc. So it takes that to a whole different level. And I agree. I think AI can really help a teacher meet the jagged learner profile of 34 kids in the classroom. Mm-hmm. It has been impossible for us to actually get this done to date. But in New York City, I know you're also leaning on a massive pathways initiative as well too. And I believe you're using digital fluency as the overlying construct to bring it all together. Can you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about this idea of digital fluency and pathways, etc.?
Yeah. So, again, thanks, Jean-Claude. I mean, so again, the big goal is to make sure each and every one of our kids, and I do mean that, we take that very, very seriously. It's not some of the kids who go to some of the schools, or if you happen to be at a CTE school. No. All of our students are graduating with a real plan for career success, and whenever it is, with college credits, with industry certifications, with real paid industry experience, none of it which is random. Back to technology in a second, is all leading towards rewarding career. And so, digital fluency, computer science is a piece of it. And for a while in New York City, that was like the focus. How do we make sure that kids are taking a course? That's a piece of it. But how do we make sure that all of our kids, they're not going to be prepared to enter the workforce and be successful if they're not digitally fluent? So we want to make sure, just to put some, really, and we are weaving this into the curricula in high school, and making sure that the work experiences dovetail with these. Every kid who's graduating high school should be very familiar with how to use the Microsoft, Office suite, and the Google suite, and the other programs out there. There's an assumption out there, of course, that, hey, all of our kids are, technophiles and they use technology all the time. That does not mean that they know how to use Excel. That does not mean that they're familiar with what a portal would look like when you open a checking account and how you move your money around and so forth. So we are committed to making sure our kids are digitally fluent through different methods. But Jean-Claude, this is one of the things, like, there's not really a roadmap to do that for 915,000 kids. And so we are learning, and we're going to make, some technology bets about this. By the way, one other quick thing, in case it's interesting to anybody, we in order for us to meet our pathways goals, we have to provide something we really don't provide to our kids right now, and that is real career counseling. So if you want to become, a cyber security specialist, what are the certifications that you need? Do you need a 4-year degree? If you do, what majors, what colleges should you go to? What does the entry level job pay? And then what does that lead to? Trying to rely solely on human beings to provide all that information that is updated in real time is going to be a very, very heavy lift. But think about an AI program that can, again, help enhance that relationship by providing career counseling that is up to date, very practical, and personalized. So just to say, these are some of the problems we're trying to solve with this technology.
And thank you. Go ahead. Just one more, Charlie, before you go. A few weeks, maybe a couple of months ago, I forget how long ago, one of our league districts asked, "Can we have a discussion on AI?" Mike Matsuda. I just saw Mike upstairs, by the way, in our day here in San Jose, California. We have to turn people away after 800. Teachers, principals, and Patrick, Adam, and Melissa, all you guys were there as well too. And Adam, I met some of your teachers from Iowa City who actually were in attendance. I want to paraphrase one of the questions that was in the chat. How do you get that through line, not just community and administrators, but teachers understanding and buying in and being participating? That requires strategy. How are you guys thinking about that kind of through line to teachers in your community on AI?
Yeah, Jean-Claude, if I could build on that, if anybody can share a concrete approach for how did you engage your community in building that vision, we'd love to hear that. Melissa, I saw you come up.
Yeah, so in regards to the teachers, we specifically put together an AI advisory committee, and we asked for applications. People had to fill out a quick Google form, but really talk about their why, as to why they wanted to be on this committee. We had more teachers want to be on this committee than any committee we've ever had. These people are having an early adopter growth mindset, and they are there to be solution seekers versus obstructionists. And it is a highly engaged community. And at the same time, we went out to our community because as you look at AI, and we heard Adam refer to this, AI can be very polarizing. So when I considered the National Education Report on AI, what really resonated with me was the need for policy and to have some guardrails. And the guardrails for teachers, because that will protect them, guardrails for students so that they don't get into trouble and wander off unknowingly. And so we kicked off an AI leadership and literacy event in December, followed by 3 comprehensive town halls. These town halls had brought together stakeholder groups from students, parents, and then teachers alike. And it was interesting because I give it to the teachers. They knew parents had been invited. I had invited them too. But in other issues where we've had town halls, teachers have not necessarily felt the need to come to the table. And this was an unpaid situation. And our teachers were like, we're not going to have parents dictating what our policy is going to look like. We need to show up. And so they came to all 3 town halls, had great representation, and we asked our 3 research-based questions about what excites them, what are their concerns, and then how they wanted to see it used. And I'm telling you, I have a highly engaged community here, and if I fail to act and not remain on the cutting edge, our parents here in El Segundo will get in their cars and drive their kids down the road, okay, to Manhattan Beach or to a private school because they are advocates. They've got social capital. And so they're going to go take advantage of whatever opportunity they think will best benefit their child. So I can't tell you how excited I was with the outcome of the results that I gathered from this. Our board had all of the feedback, and we are really taking a reassure that we are using a human-centric approach. And from this town hall approach, all we've done is built allies. And so it's just paid off tenfold.
Melissa, lots of curiosity about how big your committee was.
The committee is about 18 movers and shakers. But we're a 3,500 kid district. I've got roughly 165 teachers.
Melissa, you talked about guardrails, and I'm curious what happens when those fail, right? What kind of unanticipated challenges have you all seen? What responses have you created, either proactively or reactively? Can we get some sort of real, stories from the trenches, maybe Adam or Patrick?
So I can jump right in there again. To go back to what we did as well, we also formed an AI task force like Melissa, but we started with our board. So we passed a board resolution really that helped codify what the team was going to look like, what the cross-functional review is going to be, the type of requirements that we were going to develop. So that way we then got the board involved. And so politically, we're able to make sure that they knew we have the humans in the loop, that they're aware of our task force and the outcomes that task force is going to produce. And so we're really looking forward to, next steps in terms of policies, in terms of tools, in terms of best practices, as well as putting together like what I call an AI nutrition fact sheet, right? And so this goes back to your next question about what unanticipated kinds of things that have we come across, right? So in California, you haven't read or you haven't accessed some of the press, right? So there are school districts that have dealt with inappropriate deep fakes, nude photos of other kids, right? And these are kids creating content of using AI, and really, causing a lot of harm with that as well, right? So in Linwood, what we're trying to do is we're putting together an AI incident response plan. So I know all the IT folks, who are on the call or if I've seen that everyone's prepared for cybersecurity, right? But no one's really prepared for what an AI incident could occur, right? And so how you deal with it, how you mitigate it, the type of risk that it happens, the harm it can cause, low, medium, high risk. So I think when it comes to the type of tabletop exercises that are often common with cybersecurity, I think doing a tabletop exercise with staff, students, your community, and your parents, right? Really preparing, detecting, and really trying to contain all of these type of scenarios is very important to do. We're starting that process now because guess what? It's only going to be a matter of time before students are going to end up using these AI things in an inappropriate way, right? And so that requires, again, what Digital Promise has really been at the forefront in is really AI literacy, right? Making sure that digital literacy, AI literacy is at top of mind. It's age appropriate. It goes back to the fundamentals that everyone on this panel has mentioned before. It's like, hey, we need to make sure that digital literacy, AI literacy is always embedded in what we do, how we teach, all the conditions and access and the tools that we provide. Make sure AI literacy, digital literacy is at the forefront of that, right? And I would say that, when you think about all of these different tools, and you think about personalized learning, you think about all the stuff that AI can do, right? It's also important to answer the question about what it isn't, right? So AI, personalized learning, these platforms, it's not just providing the same content, right? Again, right? It's not dehumanizing education by removing, the teacher in the room, right? It's not using these algorithms to make these high stake decisions, right? It's not, using student data in nefarious ways, and it's not limiting, students to these narrow pathways, right? And so like what it isn't, that's the answer we have, right? So now we know that what it isn't, guess what? Now we can shape and we can transform that.
Yeah. One of our colleagues at Digital Promise likes to say, there's teaching students with AI, and then there's teaching students about AI. And the latter is just as important as the former. Adam, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it's interesting listening to Patrick and Melissa share. We've had so many similar experiences, whether that's the committee approach, where we also have an AI advisory committee structured in a very similar manner, and some of those challenges that Patrick articulated. And actually even the AI incident response, that's actually something we just started working on a process to develop within the past 2 weeks. So again, a lot of alignment there, and I don't think that's probably a coincidence. One of the things, and I wouldn't say this is an unanticipated challenge, but maybe the depth of the challenge has been greater than I anticipated. Working both with our AI advisory team, which has been working now at this point for a year. One of the challenges we had with that group initially was working to develop a common understanding of what AI means. And defining AI, you can take multiple approaches, and there isn't necessarily one clear way, but we wanted to define it in a way that we could also then operationalize, so that when we worked on determining what our policies would look like, what our resources would look like, that sort of thing, that we had shared understanding of that. And then moving beyond the advisory team to the broader district, again, whether we're talking about educating students as it relates to AI, or again, those conversations with teachers and conversations with our school board and with our broader community. That's an area where, early on, I think, some people come in with an understanding that AI is simply generative AI. It is ChatGPT, it is that sort of platform. And so, when we say, we're going to encourage the use of AI in the classroom, obviously very broadly, but we would get a lot of pushback and people, oh, AI should be banned. Well, actually, we've been using artificial intelligence in the classroom for years and years in so many contexts. And so approaching that conversation from a productive and hopefully proactive standpoint has been something that's really important for us. So as we develop resources for our teachers and for our community, and as we develop guides for students, articulating what AI can be has been a really key part of that, and I think has addressed one of our key challenges.
Adam, just
Yeah,
sorry.
Jean-Claude.
No, I want to just quickly follow on some of the strings, and also want to lean on something I saw in the chat as well too. Keeping this discussion on community and these committees and folks who are at the table. We were a few of us were in massive conference last week in Miami, and Patrick, of course, you were there too. Mostly chief technology officers, CIOs, etc., from school districts across the country. And the question that came to us on stage was, how are the chief academic officers and chief technology officers talking to each other about the use of AI and technology? Because we know in so many places, the CTO or the CIO may not be on cabinet. So maybe four of you or two of you or one of you talk a little bit about how you are integrating these parts of your district.
Yeah, and El Segundo, our two are both on cabinet, both cabinet positions. They work seamlessly. They're both on the AI advisory committee meeting, and part of that committee. So it's essential that you've got to break down barriers and compartmentalization when you consider this. When I listened to Patrick and Adam, one of the things that came to mind was I had someone say to me, well, Melissa, in your draft policy that you're working on, do you have consequences? So as Patrick talked about an AI incident response, somebody said, what about consequences for students? And I said, well, no, that would be in our discipline matrix, but it's another example of areas where it bleeds into another area. So now we're in the process of revising our discipline matrix for secondary and elementary, which we were already doing, but it needs to specifically be in there. Earlier, Jean-Claude brought up procurement, okay? Procurement in AI products needs to really have non-negotiables as it relates to FERPA and COPA to ensure our data privacy of our students and our faculty. And so that's a little of a different area that we feel we need to be intentional and just make sure that our staff knows, okay, if I have a hot idea and I've talked with a vendor, what are the steps to make sure I go through the district's procurement and that this particular product or this particular vendor meets those requirements.
Yeah.
And quickly before you guys jump in,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just quickly, one thing that we hear in that policy creation, Melissa, too, from the league is that shouldn't be just punitive, right? It should be sort of creating sort of positive effect as well to the use of AI technology. Sorry, Dan, please go ahead.
Oh no worries. In addition to, we certainly have our chief technology officer and representatives from his team and our both our academic and schools folks working together on policy committees. Probably more effective, at least for us, in breaking down the barriers and the silos, which absolutely do exist. Is the project work. So, we're very excited about a pilot we have now of a Gen AI teaching assistant for algebra, which we developed with our partners from Microsoft Education and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But this wasn't something that our tech folks went off in their own tent and developed themselves based on what they thought might work. It was really a collaboration with our teaching and learning folks. And in addition to that, now that we are out there, piloting in 5 of our high schools with 18 of our math teachers, and we get about 100 plus students who are using it feeding it prompts and so forth. And it's a closed system, by the way, so it's, you know, safe and secure. But they are having to now refine this tool together. You know, we want to get both perspectives as we are building out these tools. And it's great to see. I got to say, the collaboration has been terrific. I mean, obviously they're, you know, so the language is sometimes different, and you need to have some people interpret. But overall, it's been very, very successful. And, you know, that's what we hope to see going forward as we see more and more pilots and bets out there in the field. Is we want to make sure there's not a single owner for any of those, that they're all done in a collaborative way. And so we're hopeful about that.
Jean-Claude, you mentioned in your, oh, sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I was going to add that. So I think it also helps to be certificated as well as a former classroom teacher, as well as an administrator in a CTO role, right? So, you know, I'm one of the folks who actually taught, was an administrator. You know, I was a director overseeing assessment and accountability, and now I oversee IT and technology, right? So I think bridging that communication really is really around the outcomes that we're trying to accomplish, right? At the COSA conference that I was at with Jean-Claude in Miami, you know, I was on a panel with, you know, Sierra from Digital Promise as well, where we really looked at outcome-based contracting as a vehicle, right? To really identify the types of educational outcomes and goals and KPIs, key performance indicators, that, you know, the teaching and learning side would like to accomplish before you get into a contract with any type of ed tech vendor. I know that that's beyond the scope of AI, but I do think that making sure you identify the outcomes in the first place, right? The educational outcomes that you want, the teaching and learning goals that you want, those are the critical aspects. And when it comes to AI, when it comes to ed tech.
Yeah.
Just quickly on Patrick's push here, I mean, if you have not heard about this initiative, you all should look at it. Not just the folks in the panel, but folks in the audience. This idea of outcomes-based contracting. It is supported by the Southern Education Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think it could potentially be revolutionary, effectively, how we think about procurement.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chaula, please go ahead.
No, I think that ties in neatly to my next question, because you said in your presentation, AI is ultimately going to be an ed tech challenge. And we've been through some of those, right, around personalized learning, for instance. So if you could go back and reflect on the lessons from some of those experiences, what would you want to avoid? What would you want to insist on? What are some lessons we should take, you know, from some of the experiences around personalized learning, for instance?
Okay, so for me, I think, again, I think there's three things. Number one, you have to measure what matters. And measuring what matters, it's not time on task, right? It's not user logins, right? We want to measure higher order thinking skills. We want to make sure that kids are engaged. We want to make sure kids really think critically about the content and that they're self-directed, they have agency, right? So I think that's number one, measuring what matters. Number two, it goes back to what Jean-Claude mentioned earlier, as well as everyone in Digital Promise, is really prioritizing equity and access, right? And so, again, you know, AI platforms, tools, personalized learning, some of these actually worsen the opportunity gaps because why? It doesn't have accessibility features built in from the start, right? And so making sure you center equity, making sure that all of these tools, all these platforms takes all of that in mind, co-creating, right? That's what inclusive design is all about, right? And that's what really culturally responsive types of platforms is all about. And then the last I would say is, again, leverage the human, leverage the teacher, leverage the administrator, leverage all the adults and their expertise, because personalized learning solutions, you know, they're not supposed to disempower teachers, right? They're supposed to empower them. It's not a babysitting tool, for lack of a better word, right? You have to make sure that it empowers a teacher to, like, again, engage in the content, allow students to develop that agency that we want them to, and so they can have self-directed learning in the long run.
Yeah. Anybody else? We have a question in the chat. Can I tee you up for that, Jean-Claude?
Okay, I'm going to paraphrase it a bit if it's okay with you.
Yes, please.
This question on the future, there are two questions like that. And I would love to engage the four of you in a bit of sort of imagining and dreaming around what the future could look like. And we all know in AI that could be 2 years from now, 6 months from now. But let's take a look down the road. What would you, I mean, if this were to be implemented well, ethically, right, inclusively, etc., what's the potential here around pedagogy, curriculum, the mental model for teaching, assessment? Dream with us a little bit about what you think the future could hold for education.
I think I want to go back to something Patrick talked about, which is important in this. So we're not just, again, kids in a candy store taking stuff off the shelves that look good, connecting this to goals, both big goals, our big, hairy, audacious goals, but even short-term goals and KPIs. And so, that Jean-Claude, you're probably thinking, man, I just asked him to dream, and he's giving, he's getting me right back down into the logistics and the weeds. But think of a system where every student has an individualized set of goals, and I'm talking about as early as elementary school, where they are really setting the parameters. The parents are saying, this is what I'm looking for my child's education, both academically, socially, cognitively, non-cognitively. This is what I'm looking for. And ultimately the young person is saying, this is what I'm looking for. This is, I want to have a purpose in going to school. I don't just want to go through the motions and, sit here for the number of hours, as Patrick's talking about, time on task, until I get to walk across in a cap and gown and get a piece of paper, which may not mean much to me. But think of a system where kids see school as a real method to achieve their goals, and it actually does that, where we can start looking at how our kids are doing, which right now, and I'll say at least in New York City, we have no systematic way of seeing how our alums are doing, which is keeps me up at night, is a heartbreak. We're not there just to get them out of high school. We're there to make sure they have great lives where they're achieving their goals and being great, productive, positive forces in their community. And we don't really know how that's going. But think of a world where we're able to look at that on an individual basis and say, all of the students who came through were prepared well, but they actually did. When we looked at them at age 21 and age 25 and age 35, they were doing really well against the life goals that they have. And because we created a system that is responsive to the individual, as opposed to making sure we're getting as many kids through our system as efficiently as possible. So it's very exciting to think about really shifting, again, not shifting away from the centrality of the relationships, the human relationships. That's not going to go away. I don't see that going away, but I do see the focus being quite different on the individual as opposed to the system, the school, the classroom, the group of kids.
Then I had a colleague at Stanford University who said the greatest tension in education is the gap between bureaucracies. So if we can eliminate that and shift the agency to the young person, to the learner, imagine. Melissa, Patrick, Adam?
Yes, I wanted to just add, we had 27, 28 kids come down to air show on Sunday. And it was kind of a task that was designed by Brett Rower from AI EDU. And the kids had a challenge to come up with a lesson plan and presentation and video about AI, using AI, and come up with a lesson plan that would also embed like the fact that they had ethics and that there was not plagiarism going on or whatnot. And each one of those projects were so personalized, high interest, were meaningful to the students, showed creativity, had a human element. A lot of these kids worked on this when they were all over the country during spring break. It just showed what was possible. And there were all kinds of students there. Every single one, all Cajon Valley had students participate in this challenge. And it just shows what's possible, that when you allow kids to not have, just give them a brief scaffold, right? and let them explore what's possible and really create and construct meaning, it is mind-blowing what they can do. And so I'm very hopeful that our teachers can feel a little more freedom, and then also allow to put frameworks in place that are going to be easier for them to support those learners that need a little extra. Do I need text at a little lower level so I can read and succeed? Do I need a brainstorm so that I will start writing and producing and feeling productive? So just looking at the possibilities, but to see these kids, it really gave me a lot of hope. It was really a beautiful moment.
I was going to add that, yeah, Melissa, I agree with you completely. I think when it comes to crystal ball, Jean-Claude, around what the future of AI holds, I think AI, everyone's going to have their own AI, right? We're going to, Jean-Claude's AI, Chat GPT, you know, Chaula's GPT is going to be out there, Melissa's GPT, Adam, Daniel, GPT. But what I think is going to happen now, and I hope this is going to happen, is that human connection, human relationships, right, from adult to student, student to student is going to increase, right? Because that the whole ability to share, communicate, to really, you know, think critically about stuff, to really, you know, engage with each other. That's what I'm hoping that this increases even further, right? And so all the mundane stuff, all the lesson planning, you know, all the homework that kids end up having to submit, hopefully it can get automated, right? And it can get back to why kids come to school in the first place. It's for connections, for relationships, right? And so hopefully that is an outcome of this, right? None of this AI stuff, even though I love AI, but, you know, more connectedness.
So, Adam?
Yeah, and I would just I certainly echo everything that my colleagues have shared, but jumping even a little bit further on what Patrick mentioned, you know, I'm thinking about this a little bit more from an operational side of my district, given my role. And I look at the tremendously talented teaching workforce that we have here in the district and the amount of dedication that those individuals have. And one of my longtime, you know, frustrations, which I know they share, you know, in even greater depth, is the amount of their time that needs to go to working on administrative tasks, routine tasks, things that, or even instructional tasks, frankly, that aren't necessarily advancing their students' learning or their relationships with their students, that sort of thing. And so that's, I think, maybe the counterintuitive thing here. So many people look at AI and they say, oh, this is further disconnection of people. But as others have shared, I think that by reducing the demands for our teachers and our other staff and our students to spend time on the routine, you're able to create more time for those truly exceptional interactions that people remember, that people grow from, that really advance student learning, and frankly, really advance also our staff's satisfaction. You know, the less time that they have to spend working on those things that are important, but at the same time are not the things that drive them as professionals, are not the things that have a direct and immediate outcome on our students, I think the better. And that's where, you know, some people have looked at it as if there's shame in leveraging technology, or more specifically AI, to help you do your job, or from the student perspective to help you as a student. Now, there are guardrails, right? There are things that need to be established. But at the same time, you know, I think that's one of the messages that I've tried to communicate here in our district, is there is no shame in that. It's not shameful to become more efficient and be able to devote more of your time and expertise to those areas that are the most important.
And just add, and I'm I think a point of privilege as well. You know, when I first became a superintendent, I hired a Lean Six Sigma black belt as my deputy for operations. He saved me $50 million in year one in operational efficiencies. Now, with AI, we may not need to have all Lean Six Sigma black belts in our school districts, but certainly the potential is there. Not just make the job more satisfying, but frankly more durable. today's teaching job, today's principal, school leader, the job is unsustainable and not doable, frankly, the way it's actually designed. Let me add one layer to where I've been dreaming. I was asked the same question I asked you guys. I was asked that question this week in San Diego. One of the areas I leaned on with a bunch of assessment experts was, and then you like this. When I was a principal in New York State, I was traumatized. Twice a year, we shut down schools for a week and kids get tested. I said, can you imagine if we eliminate that and instead add the kinds of microsensors in the assessment, right? In the pedagogy, in the activities, that we can honor all learning for kids, right? You make assessment transparent, really be part of the teaching learning cycle. The potential, I think, is also there to again, eliminate this idea of the 3-hour test, thank God. Chaula, please.
Yeah, no, this conversation could keep going. There's so many great questions. We're not going to be able to, unfortunately, tackle them all, but I do want to end this conversation with one question that just came in the chat, which is, how do we avoid creating a world of AI haves and have-nots? And for superintendents and district leaders and system leaders who are hesitant about AI, what message do you have? So either of those two, if y'all want to take on. Melissa?
As a superintendent, you have a moral imperative to prepare your students for the future, and the time is now. Your hesitancy and being a passenger and not the crew is really, truly doing a disservice to your students. So step up, take small steps, think out a plan, ask for help. As superintendents, there are so many networks out there to help you. We all lean in when a colleague calls. We will all lean in and help. So don't hesitate. You owe it to the students.
Daniel?
Yeah, I think ultimately the way you avoid the kind of inequities that seem to be baked into our education systems is by making, Jean-Claude mentioned this right at the beginning, AI should be an enabler. It's not the goal, it's the enabler of the goal. And if you have a goal that includes all kids, then sure, it's going to have to be applied in different ways to different kids. We've got 100,000 plus kids who live in temporary housing. They're going to need, we have now welcomed to our city almost 40,000 newcomers to our schools. Great thing. They're going to need different things than other students. But if they're all baked into the same goal and you're committed to that goal, you're going to figure out how to provide kids what they need, and whatever the differences are, what are the inequities that exist beyond the 4 walls of the school, you're going to compensate for.
A chat prompt is the same thing as inquiry-based learning, guys. So when you get a chat prompt, right, it's wanting you to do something. So teaching kids how to ask the right questions, teaching kids to get context, teaching kids, that, hey, there's more to this question than just a low-level questioning, right? That higher order thinking skills matter, right? Dive in, get in, teach inquiry-based learning. That's it, guys. That's what a chat prompt is. It's inquiry-based learning on steroids.
Mm-hmm. Adam, you have the last word.
Agree with everything that's been said. I do want to kind of take a different angle on this, which is kind of our obligation as a district to help support others and help support the broader community, whether that's engaging with research teams, whether that's at Digital Promise, the University of Iowa right next to us, so that we can advance the discourse in this area. But then also, I think about the fact that in Iowa, we have almost 350 school districts. The average school district has fewer than 1,000 students. And most of those districts do not have the resources that we have to really dig into these types of questions. So then it's imperative that we reach out, whether that's through conferences, sharing materials, whatever, so that we're trying to, again, create, whether it's rural, urban, et cetera, help to foster that understanding of what the opportunities are here, what the challenges are, and how best to overcome those challenges. That's something, we've always, really worked to make sure that what we develop doesn't just stay here in Iowa City. We're collaborating with others. We're helping to build the community more broadly so that we can all advance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Adam. I'll build on what you and Melissa said about networks. There are lots of great networks out there. I'm biased, but I think the league is one of the best ones. And we're currently recruiting. So if you're a district leader listening to this webinar, go to our website and apply to join the league. Thank you all so much. This was such a great conversation. I appreciate you all leaning in, being vulnerable. From Digital Promise and Siegel Family Endowment, as well as Robinhood, we hope to continue to bring these conversations to you. All of our recordings will be available and other resources will be available on the LinkedIn Live page, as well as Digital Promise's LinkedIn page. But if you want to continue to be part of this conversation with us, go to our website and sign up for our action reports. Thank you all and have a wonderful weekend, and happy National AI Literacy Day.